In an unexpected moment of raw emotion, legendary boxer Mike Tyson broke down in tears during a live television interview after receiving a heartfelt letter from Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. This emotional exchange revealed a surprising connection and deep mutual respect between two powerful figures from entirely different worlds. What unfolded became an unforgettable, tear-jerking moment that left the entire studio in silence. It was supposed to be a routine interview. Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion of the world, had been invited to a major American morning show to talk about his new memoir and his upcoming Netflix documentary. He appeared calm, slightly tired, but as sharp as ever. As the cameras rolled, the host smiled and said, "Mike, you've seen it all. But today, we have something you didn't expect." Tyson raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" A producer handed the host a cream-colored envelope with elegant gold writing. "This letter arrived last night from West Africa, from the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré." The audience fell silent. Even Mike's jaw tightened slightly. "He said it was for you and only you, but he agreed to let us read it live, if you wish." Mike nodded slowly, uncertain. "Go ahead." What happened next wasn't just surprising, it was soul-shaking. The letter unlocked something buried deep within Mike. What emerged wasn't the fighter, nor the showman, but the broken boy behind. The gloves and the leader who had somehow reached him from across continents. The host carefully unfolded the letter and began reading. "Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition of Burkina Faso. I do not write to you as a politician. I write as a boy who once had nothing and watched you fight on a flickering TV screen in a crowded room." Mike looked stunned. His breathing changed. "You were not just a boxer. You were proof that pain could become power. That a boy from nowhere could stand before giants and make them fall." Mike leaned forward, eyes locked on the host. "When my country was hurting, I remembered your eyes in the ring. Not your fists, your eyes. The pain, the fire, the refusal to be broken. And now I try to lead my people with that same fire." The room was completely still. "Thank you, Mike Tyson, for teaching me to rise not just as a fighter, but as a man." Mike looked away. His voice cracked. "Stop. Just stop for a second." Tears were already forming. He tried to smile, but something inside him had shattered, and the world was about to witness what remained. The host gently placed the letter on the table. Tyson's hands were trembling. The studio had never been so quiet. You could hear the lights humming. Mike looked down, trying to hold back the tears, but it was no use. They came slow at first, then heavy. "He saw me," Mike whispered. "Not the knockouts, not the fame. Just me." He wiped his face, but the tears kept falling. "I was 14, homeless, angry. I wanted to die. Back then, nobody knew. Nobody cared." The audience gasped. "I fought because it was the only time anyone looked at me." Then he looked directly into the camera. But to know that halfway across the world, someone watched me and became something, a president. He broke down completely. No camera cut away. No one dared move. The most feared man in the ring was now the most human man in the room. And in that moment, it wasn't about boxing. It was about being seen. The boy who once had no voice had now helped another boy become a leader. From pain came purpose. From punches came peace. And from a letter came healing. After the show cut to commercial, Mike sat in silence, still wiping his eyes. The host leaned in gently and asked, "Do you want to continue?" Mike nodded. "Yes. The world needs to hear this." The cameras came back on, but this time there was no script. No promotional questions. Just raw truth. "Ibrahim Traoré," Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've never met you, but I feel like I know you. He held the letter, close like it was something sacred. "I wasn't supposed to survive my youth," he continued. "I was a thief, a fighter. I was locked up before I even knew what love was." The crowd leaned in, completely silent. But this man, this president, he saw strength in my suffering. Mike paused, swallowing hard. Nobody talks about the pain, the hunger, the nights you pray not to wake up. He looked down at the letter again. But this told me I wasn't alone. The studio, once filled with laughter and bright lights, had become a space for reflection. One man's tears had become another man's message, and now the world was listening. That same evening, halfway across the world, President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his modest office in Ouagadougou. The lights were dim. A fan buzzed overhead. His security team waited outside, giving him space. He was watching the interview live. When Mike cried, Traoré lowered his gaze, quietly wiping away tears of his own. He felt it. He really felt it. He whispered in French. Behind him, the wall wasn't filled with portraits of presidents. It was covered with photographs of children in dusty classrooms, of farmers, nurses, and soldiers, his people. Among them, in a simple black frame, was a photo of a young Mike Tyson, shirtless, fists clenched, eyes burning. It was never about boxing. It was about spirit. A few feet away, his assistant entered with an update. The UN just reached out. They saw the interview. They want to resume discussions on your education reforms. Ibrahim nodded. Let them wait. Tonight, the world doesn't need politics. He turned back to the screen. Tonight, it needs truth. Back in New York, the interview went viral within hours. It reached millions. Clips of Mike Tyson weeping over Ibrahim Traoré's letter flooded the internet. Celebrities shared it. Schools played it. Refugee camps across Africa cheered. But it wasn't over. Just after midnight, Mike's phone rang. Unknown number. International. Code. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? A calm, deep voice replied. Mr. Tyson, this is Ibrahim Traoré. Silence. Mike's throat tightened. You're the guy from the letter. Yes, Traoré answered. And you're the man who taught me how to survive when I was just a boy with no shoes. They didn't speak like legends. They spoke like survivors. Thank you, Mike whispered. No, Traoré said. Thank you. You gave me the courage to stand when the world told me to kneel. A pause. Mike, would you come to Burkina? Faso? Mike blinked, stunned. What for? Not for a fight, Traoré replied. For hope. And in that moment, two men born on different continents, scarred by different battles, found a bridge through pain. And something extraordinary had just begun. Mike Tyson didn't sleep that night. After speaking with Ibrahim Traoré, he sat, silently, reading the letter again and again. It didn't have fancy words, just truth. One line echoed in his head. When I was 13, I fought not with gloves, but with hunger. That was Mike's life too. He remembered stealing food from corner stores in Brooklyn, fighting bullies, being locked up in juvenile detention. Nobody believed in him except one trainer. Just like Ibrahim had no one until he believed in himself. The next morning, Mike's team entered his dressing room with a packed schedule brand. Deals, training sessions, media appearances. He looked at the papers, then tore them up. I'm flying to Burkina Faso. They stared at him in shock. Mike, are you sure? He looked back with the same fire he once had in the ring. It's not about boxing anymore. It's about the kid I was, and the boy he still is. 2 days later, Mike arrived in Ouagadougou. There were no red carpets, no paparazzi, just sun, dust, and faces lit with disbelief. Children ran barefoot alongside his car, shouting, Mike Tyson! Mike Tyson. But he wasn't there to be a hero. He was there to answer a letter. He was there for the boy who had once watched him and became a leader. Traore greeted him at the modest government house. No cameras, no staged smiles. Just a handshake, and it lasted longer than expected. They didn't talk politics. They talked pain. Traore took Mike to a rural school. Its walls were cracked. Paint peeling, but the sound of children's laughter echoed through the air. One boy had a swollen eye from a street fight. Mike sat beside him on the floor. "You fight?" he asked. Gently, the boy nodded. "Me too," Mike whispered. "But you know what the strongest punch is? The one you don't throw." He slipped off his championship ring and handed it to the boy to hold, just for a moment. The boy's hands trembled. Then Traore knelt beside them. "In this country," he said softly, "you are not your scars. You are your spirit." The boy cried. So did Mike. That night, the president and the boxer sat together on a rooftop, overlooking the glowing lights of a quiet Burkina Faso. Traore handed Mike a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, each one from a child across the country. "They heard about the letter I sent you," Traore said. "Now, they've written to you." Mike opened one. "Dear Mike Tyson, you are a lion who made it through fire. Please don't forget us." Another read. "My papa died fighting to protect our village. But now, I believe I can be strong like you." Tears streamed down Mike's cheeks. He clutched the letters like they were gold. "These," he said, voice trembling, "are worth more than any belt. More than anything I've ever won." Traore nodded. "And now you see, brother, pain connects us more than fame ever could." The air was still. No sound except the wind softly rustling the pages of those letters. And in that silence, a bond was sealed, not by power, not by politics, but by two broken boys who survived. As Mike flipped through the last letter, one stood out. It was written on torn notebook paper. "Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Maddie. I am 11 years old. My father was a soldier. He said your fights gave him courage. He died last year. Now I try to be brave. I heard you cried. That means even lions cry, so maybe I can cry too." Mike's hands trembled. He remembered being 11, watching his own mother fade away, feeling like the world had no room for boys like him. He whispered, almost to himself, "Even lions cry." President Traore looked at him, his eyes filled with silent understanding. "That boy, Maddie, he lives nearby. Would you like to meet him?" Mike didn't answer with words. He simply nodded. The next morning, they drove 2 hours down dusty roads passing herds of goats, women balancing water jugs, and boys kicking footballs made of plastic bags. When they arrived, Maddie ran out barefoot, his face lit with disbelief. He wasn't meeting a boxer. He was meeting a broken warrior, just like himself. Maddie stood frozen. He held a photo of his father, creased and faded, like it had been hugged every night under his pillow. Mike knelt down, eye to eye with him. "You're braver than I ever was, little man." Maddie blinked, tears brimming. "But I cry." Mike smiled gently. "So do I." Without warning, the boy stepped forward and hugged him. Not the kind of hug meant for cameras. The kind you give when you're afraid someone might leave again. Mike held him tight. Then he broke. Tears poured from his eyes loud, shaking sobs that came from the deepest part of his soul. There were no cameras. The crew stayed respectfully distant. But President Traore stood nearby, hand over his chest, eyes glossy. It wasn't just a hug between a child and a legend. It was pain meeting pain, loss meeting loss, and healing being born in between. As they sat together beneath a mango tree, Maddie looked up and asked quietly, "Will you leave too?" Mike met his gaze. "I'll be back," he said. I promise. And this time, he meant it. Mike returned to America 2 days later. The interview was already scheduled on a major network. What was supposed to be a simple conversation about boxing took an unexpected turn. The host joked, "You've been off the grid, Mike. Africa, huh? What were you doing starting a new fight club?" Mike chuckled, then paused. "Actually, I was being healed by an 11-year-old boy." The room went silent. He pulled out Maddie's letter. The audience leaned in. "Even lions cry," Mike read aloud, his voice cracking. And then, right there on live television, the most feared boxer in history cried. The studio froze. No one knew what to say. The host's smile faded into a quiet, respectful stillness. "I met kids who've lost everything," Mike said softly. "And yet, they have more heart than most champions I've ever seen." He looked straight into the camera. "Ibrahim Traoré, thank you for reminding me that real strength isn't fists. It's love." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. And across the world, millions watched in silence. Some cried, some smiled. But all of them felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The day after that emotional interview, Mike's phone rang. It was early morning. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him to answer. "Mike Tyson?" the voice asked gently. "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso." There was a pause. Then, Traoré said, "I saw what you did for Maddie. You didn't just honor his father. You healed something in him. And in you." Mike was quiet, moved by the sincerity in his voice. "I want to invite you back," Traoré continued. "But this time, not just for one boy, for a nation. I want you to speak to our youth. Tell them your story. Show them what rising from nothing really looks like." Mike exhaled, deeply. His voice cracked. "You don't know what that means to me, brother." "I do," Traoré replied. They made plans right then and there. Within 48 hours, Mike was flying back. This wasn't about boxing anymore. It was about redemption, about turning scars into a message. And for the first time in decades, Mike Tyson wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for hope. The school in Ouagadougou was packed. Hundreds of students in faded uniforms sat on the dusty ground, waiting. Some held notebooks. Others clutched old newspaper clippings. Of Tyson, Mike arrived quietly, no flashy entourage, no stage lights. Just him, a chair, and a translator. He began speaking. His words were slow, but each one hit like a punch. "I used to think I was just a weapon. I didn't know I had a heart. Until I listened to a child." He told them about Maddie, about his mother's death, about prison, about how he fought in the ring because he couldn't fight the pain anywhere else. Tears welled up in the eyes of boys who once believed real men never cried. Mike stood up. He walked into the crowd, pointed to a boy. You think no one sees you, but I do. You're strong, even when you feel broken." The boy broke down crying. Then another, then another. From the back of the crowd, President Traoré wiped a tear from his cheek. This wasn't just a speech. It was a revolution of hearts. That night, Mike and President Traoré sat under the stars. No cameras, no press. Just two men with heavy pasts and full hearts. "Why did you write that letter, Mr. President?" Mike finally asked. Traoré smiled softly. "Because I saw the boy behind the fighter, and I believed. The world still needed him." Mike didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat tightened. Then Traoré added, "You remind my people that strength isn't about fists. It's about rising again and again after life knocks you down." Mike nodded. "That's all I ever tried to do." Then they shook hands, not as icons, not as heroes, but as men who had walked through fire and decided to build something from the ashes. No, they didn't just shake hands. They clasped hands like brothers, like two survivors from opposite corners of the world. The next morning, photos of Mike's visit to the school went viral. But not for fame, for something deeper. People across the globe wept, watching clips of him hugging children, telling them they mattered, reminding them that scars aren't shameful. They're proof you survived. Mike Tyson left Burkina Faso not just as a boxing legend, but as a healer. And Ibrahim Traoré, the world saw him differently now. Not just a leader, but a listener of hearts. Back in New York, Mike returned to the same studio where it had all started. The host invited him for a follow-up interview. The producers expected light banter, political niceties. What they got was silence. The lights dimmed. Mike looked older, wiser. His hands trembled slightly. The host asked, "Mike, what changed you the most in Burkina Faso?" Mike looked directly into the camera and whispered, "A child and a president." Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small drawing. It was from Maddie, the little boy from the village. A simple picture, Mike holding his hand, President Ibrahim Traoré standing behind them, smiling. The studio felt completely still. Mike tried to speak, but choked on his words. "He doesn't want to fight anymore," he finally said. "He just wants to grow." The audience held their breath. The host, usually quick with words, had nothing to say. Mike's voice cracked. "That boy gave me peace. And Traoré, he gave me purpose." A tear rolled down his cheek. And for the first time, the world didn't see a fighter, didn't see a legend. They saw a man finally healing. After the show, Mike sat alone in his dressing room. A staff member knocked and walked in, holding a brown envelope. "This just arrived," she said. "International mail." Mike opened it carefully. Inside was a second letter from President Ibrahim Traoré. The handwriting was familiar. But the words struck even deeper. "My brother Mike, they call me a president, but I am just a man who dreams. Dreams of healing. Dreams of peace. Your visit reminded us all, pain is not the end. It is a beginning, if we dare to feel it, not fight it. Burkina Faso thanks you. I thank you." And the boy now sleeps peacefully. Mike stared at the paper, and for the first time in years, he whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for every broken kid in the world and every leader with a heart. He pressed the letter to his chest and said softly, "I was never the baddest man on the planet. I was just a boy, waiting to be heard. And finally, someone had listened. 1 week, that's all it took, to turn pain into purpose." Mike Tyson stood on a balcony in Harlem, watching a small group of kids sparring below. He wasn't their coach. He was just present. When one boy tripped, Mike didn't laugh. He walked down, lifted him up, and said, "Every fall teaches you how to rise." His phone buzzed. A photo from Burkina Faso. Maddie was smiling, standing beside a brand-new boxing gym. The sign above read, "Tyson Hope Center, sponsored by the government of Burkina Faso." Signed by President Ibrahim Traoré himself. Mike closed his eyes. The world once called him a monster. Now, a boy across the ocean saw him as a mentor. And that was enough. The end. But your tears matter. If this story moved you, even just a little, please like to show love. Subscribe for more true stories that heal. Comment below, what moment made you cry the most? Let's fill this space with love, strength, and second chances. Because even the toughest fighters need someone to believe in them. Until the next story, stay human, stay kind,